Welcome to Life Stories, where one child's whisper shattered generations of silence. What if the person you trusted most to protect your child was hiding a nightmare beneath their floorboards? In today's story, a single sentence from a 5-year-old little girl will unravel a bond of blood, tear open a buried secret, and test the limits of what one mother is willing to believe. This isn't just a story about right and wrong. It's about the moments we almost ignore and the quiet voices that demand to be heard. Stay with us, because by the time we reach the truth, nothing about family, trust, or love will feel the same. Let's begin. When I pulled into the long gravel driveway, the only sound was the crunch of tires beneath me and the quiet, persistent hum of unease in my chest. I hadn't seen my daughter Sophie in less than 24 hours. Just one overnight. One night away for a school retreat that I had told myself was important. But as I stepped out of the car and stared up at my mother-in-law's old farmhouse, surrounded by skeletal trees and a silence that felt unnatural, a single thought pressed against my ribcage. Something is wrong. I expected Sophie to come barreling through the door in her ladybug rain boots, her wild curls bouncing, her arms already outstretched for a hug. But when the door finally creaked open, she emerged slowly. She held her stuffed bear, Mr. Paws, tightly to her chest. Her eyes were lowered, her lips set in a way no 5-year-olds should be. Sophie? I crouched down and opened my arms. She walked into them, but something in her hug felt off. She clung too long. Her grip wasn't joyous. It was desperate. In the car, she was silent, staring out the window like she'd just woken up from a dream she couldn't shake. I tried to make light conversation, asking if she had fun with Grandma Margaret. No answer. I reached for the radio, but then she leaned toward me and whispered, "Mommy, Grandma said I should never tell you what I saw." My hands froze on the steering wheel. "What did you see, baby?" She looked up at me with those wide, solemn eyes, too old for her face. "There was a girl in the basement." My blood went cold. She was crying. She said her arm hurt. Grandma told me not to talk to her, said she wasn't real. I should have driven straight home, called someone. But instead, I stared straight ahead, trying to breathe, trying to rationalize. Maybe Margaret had a life-size doll, a mannequin. Maybe Sophie had seen a shadow. Maybe it was a nightmare. But deep down, I knew better. Sophie wasn't the kind of child to invent fear out of nothing. And there was something about the way she said it, like she was still afraid, still carrying the weight of someone else's pain. I called Jessica, my best friend since college and a licensed child psychologist. She didn't hesitate. "Rachel," she said, her voice sharp, "this is not something a 5-year-old just makes up. You need to take it seriously." I took Sophie home, tucked her in with her cartoons and Mr. Paws, and locked myself in the kitchen. I dialed 911 with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. My daughter told me she saw a girl locked in a room in my mother-in-law's basement. The dispatcher didn't brush me off. She asked for the address, then said, "We're dispatching officers now." As soon as I hung up, I texted Jessica, "Come watch Sophie." "Now," she replied with one word, "On my way." 10 minutes later, Jessica arrived, calm as ever. She sat with Sophie while I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't wait for the police. I didn't wait for logic to talk me down. I just drove. Every bump in the road, another question punching me in the gut. The farmhouse looked even more lifeless than before. Margaret's car was in the driveway, curtains drawn. No sound. She opened the door with a thin-lipped smile. "Back so soon?" I forced a casual tone. "I think Sophie left Mr. Paws's picnic outfit. You know how she gets." She narrowed her eyes, clearly suspicious. "I didn't see anything. I just want to check." A long pause. Then she stepped back. "Be quick." Inside, the air was still, stale, the kind of silence that absorbs sound instead of holding it. I pretended to rummage through Sophie's things in the guest room, then moved slowly toward the back hallway. The basement door was closed. "Don't go down there," Margaret snapped from behind me. My hand froze on the knob. Why not? She wasn't down there. Then why would Sophie say she saw someone? She's 5. She imagines things. "Not like this." I turned. Her face had changed, no longer guarded, now cold, rigid. "I already called the police," I said. "They're on their way." For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, not regret, contempt. You really are just like I thought, she said. Weak, dramatic, always needing something to fight. I'm fighting for my daughter, and if there's someone in that basement, I'm not leaving until they're safe. Then came the sound. Tires crunching on gravel outside. Red and blue lights splashed across the living room walls. I opened the front door and waved the officers in. She won't let me check the basement, I said. We'll handle it, one replied. I stepped outside. The air was cold against my skin, but I couldn't feel it. I stood on the porch, my fists clenched, and waited. Then I heard the thud, the slam of something heavy, the unmistakable clank of metal against wood. A voice shouting, "We need backup! We've got something!" And in that moment, I knew. I knew Sophie hadn't imagined it. I knew there was someone down there. I knew that for 3 weeks, while everyone had been sharing photos of a missing girl named Emily Carter online, the girl had been locked behind a false wall in a basement that smelled of dust and silence, and I had nearly left her there. What would you do if your child told you something unbelievable? Would you believe them or brush it off as imagination? What if your trust in family blinded you to a nightmare hiding in plain sight? That morning, I thought I was just picking up my daughter. I didn't know I was walking straight into a secret that would unravel everything I thought I knew. And this was only the beginning. Emily Carter was alive. Wrapped in a blanket, her hair matted to her face, her arm awkwardly held in a makeshift sling, she was led out of the house like a ghost returning from the underworld. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Her eyes flicked from face to face like she didn't trust the daylight. One of the officers said her name softly, over and over, like he was afraid she might disappear again if he said it too loud. And when her gaze met mine, just for a second, it hit me like a punch to the chest. There was no anger in her eyes, no pleading, just an exhausted, haunted kind of silence. The silence of someone who had stopped expecting rescue. And suddenly, everything. The smell of Margaret's cold hallway, the heavy air in that farmhouse, the way Sophie had clung to me, everything twisted into something darker, something I hadn't wanted to see. Margaret was led out in handcuffs, chin raised like this whole thing was some terrible misunderstanding. She didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even look at me. But as the officers pulled her past me, she murmured something I almost didn't catch. She was better off here. Those words echoed louder than any siren. The officers told me what they'd found. A hidden room behind a false wall in the basement. No windows. One mattress. One locked door. Just enough food to keep Emily alive. No medical attention for her injured arm. No light except for a small desk lamp. A room built for control, not care. And all of it, under the same roof I had willingly sent my daughter into. I sat in my car in Margaret's driveway long after the cruisers and the ambulance were gone. Jessica had texted, asking for updates, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. The shock hadn't worn off. The guilt was settling in, growing heavier with every second. Because here was the truth I couldn't shake. If Sophie hadn't said something, if I had dismissed it as imagination, as a child's dream, Emily would still be down there. Alone, afraid, forgotten. And then came the worst thought. What if she hadn't been the first? The investigators didn't have answers yet. They were piecing things together, looking through Margaret's online history, her computer, her phone. One officer mentioned she'd been involved in forums, deep conspiracy spaces filled with people who believed children were in danger from their own families, that they had to be rescued. That's what Margaret thought she was doing. Rescuing. But none of it explained how she could smile at Sophie while another child cried beneath her floorboards. None of it explained why I hadn't trusted my gut sooner. Back home, Jessica met me at the door. Sophie was asleep on the couch, her teddy tucked under her chin, a half-eaten cracker still in her hand. I bent down and kissed her forehead. Her skin was warm, her breathing slow and steady, like the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Jessica gently touched my arm. "You did the right thing," she whispered. But I didn't feel like I had. I felt like a mother who had missed something huge, something that could have destroyed everything. That night, after Jessica left, I sat by Sophie's bed and watched her sleep. The soft whir of her nightlight cast slow shadows on the ceiling. She stirred once and reached for Mr. Paws. I placed him in her arms and she sighed softly, drifting deeper into dreams. I didn't sleep. Not really. Around 2 a.m., I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at a photo on the fridge. It was from the summer before. Me, Sophie, and Mark. His arm around me, Sophie in his lap, all three of us laughing at something I don't even remember. Mark had been the protector, the one who made the world make sense. Since he died, I'd tried so hard to be enough. For her, for me. But that night reminded me that being a mother wasn't just about love. It was about vigilance, about listening, even when the truth hurts. I called the sheriff's office the next morning. I needed to know, was Emily going to be okay? The officer on the line was kind but cautious. She's in the hospital, stable, still not speaking much. The doctors say it's going to take time. She's severely malnourished, but she's strong. Then he paused. Her parents, they want to meet you. I wasn't sure I could. What do you say to the family of a child you almost didn't save? But I agreed. Meeting the Carters was like walking into a room full of grief, trying desperately to remember how to breathe. Emily's mother hugged me so hard I thought she might break something in me. But maybe something in me needed to break. Her father just kept saying, "Thank you," over and over. But I didn't feel like a hero. I told them the truth. I only listened to my daughter. That's when Emily's mother began to cry. Real, shaking sobs. And through them, she said the words that made my knees go weak. She used to talk to strangers at the park, wander off. We thought we'd warned her enough. But we didn't think someone like that, someone who looked like family, could be the danger. Neither did I. Have you ever ignored a gut instinct, only to realize later it was the voice you should have trusted all along? Because sometimes the monsters we're taught to fear aren't strangers at all. And when they hide behind family ties, the betrayal cuts deepest. Keep reading to see what Sophie said next, and the secret she hadn't yet told me. The first time Emily smiled was 2 weeks after they found her. It wasn't the kind of smile you notice right away. It didn't stretch across her face or light up her eyes. It was small, tired, the kind of smile that slips out by accident when something feels just a little less terrifying than the moment before. I wasn't there when it happened, but her mother called me. Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. She smiled, Rachel. She looked at her brother, and she smiled. And for the first time since that awful day, I let myself cry. At home, Sophie was healing in her own way. She didn't talk about Margaret anymore. Not directly. Some nights she would mention the basement in whispers, only to ask a minute later if she could sleep with the hallway light on. She clutched Mr. Paws like he was a lifeline. At school, her teacher said she was quieter, more observant, but still curious. Still Sophie. We started seeing a therapist together. Someone Jessica recommended. It was gentle at first. Storybooks. Games. Slowly working through fear using puppets and drawings. But one afternoon, as Sophie was coloring, she looked up and said something I didn't see coming. "Mommy," she asked, "do you think Grandma thought she was helping?" The question knocked the air from my lungs. I wasn't ready for it, not because I didn't have thoughts, but because it came from her. I opened my mouth, then stopped. I could have said Margaret was sick, or wrong, or dangerous. But instead I said, "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes people do bad things because they believe something that isn't true. But it still hurts people." Sophie nodded slowly, as if that answer fit into a space she'd been holding open. She went back to her drawing like the question had never happened, but I couldn't stop hearing it for the rest of the day. Margaret never apologized. Her trial came quickly. Pleaded not guilty at first, claiming delusions of rescue, of secret networks and threats no one else could see. The evidence was overwhelming. A hidden room, chains disguised as locks for safety, journals filled with ramblings about government plots and child reprogramming. She looked older in court, smaller, but no less sure of herself. She never once turned to look at me, or at Sophie. She was found guilty on multiple counts: kidnapping, unlawful confinement, child endangerment. The judge didn't hold back in sentencing. When they read the verdict, I felt no satisfaction. Only a dull, hollow ache. Justice is never neat. It never gives you back the time, or the trust, or the quiet parts of you that trauma chews through. but it was something. After the sentencing, I stood in the parking lot outside the courthouse with Sophie's small hand wrapped around mine. She was holding a yellow flower she had picked from a patch near the sidewalk. "Can we go home now?" she asked. I nodded, and we walked away from the building without looking back. Months passed. The news stopped calling. Reporters faded. People moved on. But trauma doesn't follow a broadcast schedule. Some days, Sophie would still wake in the middle of the night, eyes wide, breath shallow. "Was she cold down there?" she asked me once. She didn't say who, but I knew. "Probably," I said, brushing hair from her cheek. But not anymore. Other days, she would hum to herself while playing, make up stories with her toys, and laugh in a way that made me believe in resilience again. One afternoon, I brought her to the park, the same park we used to visit when Mark was still alive. She climbed the jungle gym like it was a mountain, waved at ducks, ate a peanut butter sandwich with sticky fingers and a wide grin. I watched her from a bench, and for a second, the sun hit her hair just right, and I saw Mark in her. The same tilt of the head, the same spark in her eyes. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the breeze wash over me. When I opened them again, she was running toward a little girl who was sitting alone on the swings. Emily. It was the first time we had seen her since the hospital. Her parents were nearby, keeping watch, but letting her move freely. Sophie didn't hesitate. She sat beside Emily and whispered something. Emily looked down at her shoes. Then, slowly, she nodded, and together they began to swing, in rhythm, in silence, in something that felt like understanding. Watching them, I realized something that I hadn't allowed myself to admit. Sophie didn't just help save Emily. Emily helped save her, too. They had both survived something incomprehensible. And now, they were reminding each other that healing isn't a straight line. It's a series of small, quiet choices to trust the world again. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she looked at me and asked, "Do you think Emily will be okay?" I paused, then said, "I think she already is, because you saw her." Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I almost didn't tell you. I was scared you'd be mad." My heart clenched. "But you did. You told me, and that changed everything." She nodded, pulled Mr. Paws close, and drifted to sleep. I stayed in the doorway longer than usual that night, watching her, listening to her breath, thinking about how easily this story could have ended in silence. If I had ignored her words, if she had been too afraid, if Margaret had succeeded. We think being a parent means shielding our children from the world, but sometimes it means listening, really listening, when they whisper into the dark. I don't know what Sophie will remember years from now. Maybe just bits and pieces. The rain boots, the bear, the cold hallway. But I will remember everything. I will remember the strength in her voice when it trembled. I will remember the girl in the basement. I will remember that believing a child's voice saved a life. What part of this story moved you the most, and why? If this story touched your heart, comment 100 to let us know. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you believe in the power of listening, share this video with someone you care about. Thank you for watching Life Stories.